Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giribardari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Banachari Jaira Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Paramajakacharyato Tadasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Granthred Srimad Bhāgavatam Ki Sambheda Bhaktivinoda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Thank you very much. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur and Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaka Damayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam tam sajivam sadvaitam sabadhunam parijana sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we are on Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text 2, the second verse of this chapter. Swadharma charanam shaktya Swadharma charanam shaktya Vidharmacha nivartanam Vidharmacha nivartanam Daivalabdhena santosha Daivalabdhena santosha Atmavicharanarchanam Atmavicharanarchanam Swadharmacharanam shaktya Vidharmacha nivartanam Daivalabdhena santosha Atmavicharanarchanam. Please chant. Swadharmacharanam shaktya Vidharmacha nivartanam Daivalabdhena santosha Atmavicharanarchanam Swadharmacharanam shaktya Vidharmacha nivartanam Daivalabdhena santosha Atmavicharanarchanam Swadharmacharanam shaktya Vidharmacha nivartanam Daivalabdhena santosha Atmavicharanarchanam Swadharmacharanam shaktya Vidharmacha nivartanam Daivalabdhena santosha Atmavicharanarchanam. Vaishnavis. Swadharmacharanam shaktya vidharmacha nivartanam, daivalabdhena santosha, atmavicharanarchanam, swadharmacharanam shakya, vidharmacha nivartanam, daivalabdhena santosha, atmavicharanarchanam, swadharma archanam, executing one's prescribed duties. Shakya, to the best of one's ability. Vidharmat, unauthorized duties. Cha, and. Divartanam, avoiding. Daivat, by the grace of the Lord. Labdhena, with what is achieved. Santosha, satisfied. Atmavit, of the self-realized soul. Charana, the feet. Archanam, worshipping. So this is the full translation. One should execute his prescribed duties to the best of his ability and avoid performing duties not allotted to him. One should be satisfied with much gain as he achieves by the grace of the Lord, and one should worship the lotus feet of a spiritual master. So we can responsively recite this English translation. One should execute his prescribed duties to the best of his ability and avoid performing duties not allotted to him. One should be satisfied with as much gain as he receives by the grace of the Lord. And one should worship the lotus feet of a spiritual master. Okay. So here's Prabhupada's purport. In this verse, there are many important words which could be very elaborately explained. But we shall briefly discuss the important aspects of each. The final statement is Atmavit Charanarchanam. Atmavit means a self-realized soul or bona fide spiritual master. Unless one is self-realized and knows what his relationship with the Supersoul is, he cannot be a bona fide spiritual master. Here it is recommended that one should seek out a bona fide spiritual master and surrender unto him archanam, for by inquiring from and worshiping him, one can learn spiritual activities. The first recommendation is swadharmacharanam. As long as we have this material body, there are various duties prescribed for us. Such duties are divided by a system of 4 social orders: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. These particular duties are mentioned in the Shastras, and particularly in Bhagavad Gita. Swadharma archanam means that one must discharge the prescribed duties of a particular division of society faithfully and to the best of his ability. One should not accept another's duty. If one is born in a particular society or community, he should perform the prescribed duties for that particular division. If, however, one is fortunate enough to transcend the designation of birth in a particular society or community by being elevated to the standard of spiritual identity, then his swadharma or duty is solely that of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The actual duty of one who is advanced in Krishna consciousness is to serve the Lord. As long as one remains in the bodily concept of life, he may act according to the duties of social convention. But if one is elevated to the spiritual platform, he must simply serve the Supreme Lord. That is the real execution of Swadharma. Swadharma charanam shukya vidharmacha nivartanam daivalabdhena santosha atmaviccharanarchanam. One should execute his prescribed duties to the best of his ability and avoid performing duties not allotted to him. One should be satisfied with as much gain as he achieves by the grace of the Lord, and one should worship the lotus feet of a spiritual master. So, this chapter is called Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. And actually, this chapter is primarily about Ashtanga Yoga. We hear about the Ashtanga Yoga process in this chapter. We heard a little bit about it yesterday. And the Ashtanga Yoga process is 8 steps. And these are gradual stages of purification. Modern yoga only really focuses on one step, and that is really the step we know of as asana. So persons perform various kinds of bodily postures, and that's what modern yoga more or less boils out to, and not much more, just that much. Sometimes people perform a little bit of pranayama, or at least so-called pranayama. It's interesting here that this discussion of activity or devotional service starts off with this idea of one performing prescribed duties in one's particular caste and order of life. So we have the Varnashram system, 4 castes and 4 orders. And in general, these are designated according to one's work. Of course, in modern India, this is degenerated to the point where it's just based on one's birth. One's born into a family of people who have been brahmanas, he's considered a brahmana. If he's born into a family of kshatriyas, he's considered a kshatriya, etc., etc. And we see that Prabhupada puts some focus on this, but immediately in the later part of this purport, Prabhupada suggests that one rise above one's bodily conception and perform the one dharma. So there are many small dharmas, what are sometimes called jati dharma, and the Sanatana Dharma, which is the real duty of the living entity. The real duty of the living entity is to become Krishna conscious, to learn what the Supreme is, how to serve the Supreme, and to cultivate this concentration on the Supreme. So that's what real Dharma is. But if one is not really prepared to do that yet, one is too attached to the body, too attached to material plans, then one can perform one's varnashram occupation. And that is another stage. That's a lower stage. So we have jati dharma, there's various kinds of activities that are allotted to people who are not really ready to perform devotional service, who have not come to the realization that they're not the body. And we have Sanatana Dharma, which is for those who have. And for them, there's only one activity, and that is to engage in devotional service. So it's mentioned here about performing activities for the sake of Krishna consciousness, and one should be satisfied with as much as comes their way, and finally that one should approach a spiritual master. This is all very, very reminiscent of the Bhagavad Gita. You know, the idea of approaching a spiritual master, of course, is the last verse of, not the last verse, but the verse 36, I think, of 40 of the fourth chapter, where we hear that one should seek out a bona fide spiritual master. And we find that this whole section here is very reminiscent of the third, fourth, and fifth chapters, where we find out that one needs to perform various yagyas. By performing various yagyas, one becomes to the stage of knowing the truth, tattvavit. Here it's called atmavit. So also tattvavit, atmavit, same basic concept. Knowing the truth means you know that you are a part of the Supreme Lord, a part and parcel of Krishna, and that your real role, your eternal role, your only role, is to engage in service to Krishna. And by doing so, you will become purified. And so that is the nature of Krishna consciousness. And then this activity of constantly serving Krishna, we call that bhakti yoga. And Kapila Dev is saying some of the very same kind of things that Krishna says to Arjuna. But Kapila Dev starts off here with Ashtanga Yoga. In Krishna speaking to Arjuna, that's the sixth chapter. Well, actually, in the fifth chapter, there are two verses toward the end of the fifth chapter, next to the last two verses. Those verses, Krishna speaks a little bit about Ashtanga Yoga. Then in the sixth chapter, he gets into it full blown. But of course, Arjuna objects that he cannot perform this Ashtanga Yoga. It's very difficult because the mind is restless, turbulent, and strong, and therefore it's like trying to control the wind. And then Krishna eventually winds up in the sixth chapter telling Arjuna what he really wants him to do, which is to become a bhakti yogi. However, this has often been pointed out that the bhakti yoga system and the Ashtanga Yoga system are very parallel. You know, in the Ashtanga Yoga system, one tries to concentrate the mind. In the Bhakti Yoga system, one tries to concentrate the mind. In the Ashtanga Yoga system, one tries to control the breathing. In the Bhakti Yoga system, one also controls the breathing by chanting Hare Krishna. In the Ashtanga Yoga system, one tries to withdraw the mind from sense gratification. In the Bhakti Yoga system, one tries to withdraw the mind from sense gratification. But of course, one does that in a somewhat different way. And we learn that the Bhakti Yoga system is much easier and it's much less prone to failure. However, what we're going to discover is that there is a whole system of how one should perform Ashtanga Yoga. And in Burijan's book, Unveiling His Lotus Feet, where he gives a commentary on Srimad Bhāgavatam, this particular section of Srimad Bhāgavatam, Burijan describes the Ashtanga Yoga system. According to Patanjali, and he suggests that this Ashtanga Yoga system starts with yama, which are injunctions, and niyama, which are prohibitions. So before you even start doing your first posture, one does yama and niyama. And what the purpose of yama and niyama are is to purify the body so we can be in the mode of goodness. So when we attempt to do the asanas, at least the body is somewhat in the mode of goodness. That's the purpose of that. We notice that in modern yoga practice, there's no such thing. Nobody ever hears about yama and niyama. Never been to a yoga class where they discuss that. Maybe somewhere somebody does that, but usually we never hear about it. And of course, yama and niyama, one of them is, one of those things we avoid is sex life. And in modern yoga, most times people go to a yoga class with the express desire of trying to find a sex partner. So um, the real point of yoga is to purify oneself, to focus, and then concentrate. So control the senses and concentrate. So after performing yama and niyam, one performs yoga postures, which we call, asana. These various asanas, and there are many of them, are mastered by the yoga practitioner, the Ashtanga yoga practitioner. And Buddha tells us that when you master a yoga posture, that's called jai. So you have jaied a particular yoga posture. And if anyone, how many here have ever done hatha yoga? Oh, so we have some people who've done it. You know the delicious experience of rare and unusual forms of pain that normal people never experience, that you only experience when you perform yoga. And that interesting feeling of staring at the ceiling while seconds tick by as if they were minutes, and the whole thing of trying to overcome. So what the yogi practitioner is doing is through asanas, he's purifying the nadis, or these energy channels in the body. And the yoga practitioner is trying to get rid of elements of the mode of ignorance and passion in various parts of the body. So as you're experiencing this pain, the various aspects of certain joints, certain muscles, et cetera, are releasing the modes of ignorance and passion. And so, of course, some people have more, and some people have less. Some people have it in one part of their body, and some people have it in another part of the body. And this is what the asana system is all about. And when one finishes the asana system and one has jaied all the various yoga postures, then one begins pranayama, which is drilling the breath, which Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita, that one breathes out while contracting, while actually expanding the chest cavity, and one breathes in while contracting chest cavity, which is the opposite of what actually usually happens naturally. When you breathe out, the air goes out of your lungs and collapses your chest cavity. Instead, you artificially pump your chest cavity out, and then when you do the other thing, when you breathe in, you normally expands the chest cavity and you contract it so that eventually the chest is not moving in and out while you're breathing. And then by doing this, you are focusing on just the aspect of your breathing. So your consciousness has gone from thinking of 10,000 things that we normally do to just focusing on the air coming in and out of your nose. And in this way, you are able to sit comfortably in a lotus position, which is normally not a position we can sit in for any length of time. Anyone who tries to sit in a lotus position for hours and hours will know that tends to be your legs go to sleep, or you start feeling a pinching somewhere, or you feel an unbearable restlessness. So you have to get up and do something, because the body just doesn't want to retain that position. So if asana has been successfully jaied, then we can go on to the pranayama and drill this breathing. And eventually, through breathing, we learn to move the life airs in the body. One connects and recognizes the flow of various life airs in the body, and by adjusting those, one is able to control the mind, and then that brings one to pratyahara. So after pranayam is pratyahara, and pratyahara is where a person retracts the senses from their objects. We don't even notice it because the concept of sense objects coming and us enjoying them is automatic. We never think about it. It just happens because it's so completely a part of being in a material body that, if you're sitting in a room and somebody's cooking something and the smell comes into your nose, can you not smell it? If somebody says something very loud, can you not hear it if you're in earshot? In other words, the contact of the senses and the sense objects is more or less automatic. And the experience of perceiving what's going on with the senses is a chain of things. However, when you practice moving the life airs, you can slow the mind down to the point where these things happen almost as if they were in slow motion. And one can sense that a sense perception is coming and just block it. Otherwise, it would happen almost instantaneously. It happens without our thinking of it. And Burijan explains that in his Yoga Sutras, the first Yoga Sutra, he uses, this is Patanjali, a Yoga Sutra, he calls it Chitta Vritti Nirodhanat. So Chitta is the consciousness. Vritti are permutations or perturbations in that consciousness. One needs to stop them, to stop the various kinds of vritti or movements of the mind. And how does one do that? Ishvara pranidhanhanatva. So by focusing the mind on the Supreme, one can stop these various vritti, these perturbations in the mind. One can have a peaceful mind. So the pool of the mind can be like a still pond rather than a rippling pond, or like a lamp in a windless place where you have just the light on and it's not flickering back and forth because of very, very tiny air currents. So that's the way it's described. And of course, this is what we get in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita too, that we learn that one performs devotional service, and by performing devotional service, one focuses on the supersoul. And if we focus on the supersoul, then we can become dhira, or even we can become nishta, steady. These kind of things happen as a result of focusing on the supersoul. In the process of Astanga Yoga, one rises the life airs from the lower chakras, there's 6 basic chakras, and one searches those chakras to see if there's any mode of passion or mode of ignorance there, and brings the life airs there. And then that gets rid of those unwanted modes, and then one rises to the next one and to the next one. And of course, in the heart chakra, that's where the supersoul resides, and one can witness the supersoul there if one has practiced the yoga system properly. And this is all, when we're reaching the stage of dharana, which is concentration. So once we've done these other things, we concentrate the mind on various chakras and move upward. However, usually this is where yogis run into trouble, because as you get to this stage, you begin to realize that something magical is going on, that by the time you're controlling the life airs, if you can do it properly, by the time you are able to slow down these impressions of the mind, by the time you can still the pool of the mind, you are able to perform mystic cities as a result of this. You're able to become small, control other people's minds, become very heavy, do levitation, et cetera. All these kind of things become a part of the process because you are popping the hood on everyday reality. Most of us, when we drive a car, have no idea what's going on under the hood. We may have looked at an engine before, but as technology evolves, engines are more and more and more and more complex. So you look at them and you see this maze of wires and tubes and bored out metal casings of various kinds, all arrayed together in a very specific and strategic way. We have no idea what's going on there. But an auto mechanic isn't lost like that. Auto mechanic knows what each of these things does. He knows when one is malfunctioning, how to fix it. So in a similar way, most of us don't know how reality works. But when you slow the mind down to this point, you kind of immediately begin to realize how reality works, and you can play with it because you have the ability to cause changes in reality, not only for yourself, but for others. And this is why yoga practitioners usually get derailed at this point. Instead of focusing the consciousness on the chakras and moving upwards, one gets lost in performing mystic feats. And by performing mystic feats, one draws an entourage. And of course, that's always cool because we want to play God. So now we have a group of people who actually think we're some kind of God. And in India, this goes on quite a lot. And even in the Western world, sometimes people who are able to perform some, low-grade mystic powers are conceived of as some kind of divinity or something like that, even though all of it is just a kind of mystic ability in playing with reality. Okay, so after dharana concentration, we go to dhyan, which is a meditation where you focus on, at least you should be focusing on the supersoul within the heart. And then from that point, you go to absorption, which is samadhi, where one becomes absorbed in seeing the Supreme Lord within the heart. So this is a brief overview of how the Ashtanga Yoga system works. And it is possible, but it's not very practical, that in the age of Kali Yuga, the odds that we will be able to practice the Ashtanga Yoga system in such a way as to actually reach the supersoul in the heart are slim, because it's even just getting through the asana stage is impossible for most people. Most yoga studios have all these special gear that they use, mats and straps and all sorts of various things. So this is a whole interesting part of the yoga process, is that one has to gradually get loosened up, and some people never really get there. They don't have the body to be able to do that. Their body is too much out of alignment. Of course, the Ashtanga Yoga system will give you a healthier body. It does help in many ways, but you won't get to these deeper levels of mystic power or anything like that through the system if you're not really able to practice Ashtanga Yoga to that degree of precision. But with the Bhakti Yoga system, you don't need that degree of precision. And on top of it, Krishna is helping you, because we learn that by not by controlling the breathing do we focus on the Supreme Lord. We focus on the Supreme Lord by engaging in activities directed towards the Supreme Lord. So we are trying to serve the Supreme Lord rather than trying to focus our consciousness through the chakras to the heart chakra and witness the Supreme Lord in the heart chakra. So there's a similarity there, but there's also a difference. The Bhakti Yoga system is much better. And we see that in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna fails the Astanga Yoga test, but Krishna tells him, don't worry, just follow the Bhakti Yoga process. And he performs Bhakti Yoga, and that works. And in his case, Bhakti Yoga means to engage in physical warfare. He's a kshatriya. So we are learning how to control and focus, and this can be done through the practice we call the 9 types of devotional service. So through 9 kinds of devotional service, we practice keeping the mind focused on Krishna. And when it wanders away, we bring it back to Krishna. When it wanders away, we bring it back to Krishna. We, at least theoretically, get better at this as the years cross on. And we begin to experience the happiness of rising in not the yoga ladder of these various things that we go from yam to asana to pranayam, pratyahara, not that, but we rise from going from the 9 stages of devotional service, which we have, Shraddha, then Sadhu Sangha, then Bhajana Kriya, then Anartha Nivriti, and then Nishtha Ruchi, and all these kind of other aspects that we rise in from the Bhakti Yoga system. And these are physical experiences. We experience this, and this is what we mean by realization or vigyan. So we know, we hear the technicalities, the theoretics of devotional activity, we apply it, and then we get the experience of devotional service, the experience of connecting with the Supreme Lord. And so there's some more things I want to talk about, but I'm going to stop there because I want to leave time for discussion.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. One question, I have 2 questions. One is about the purport, which is the purport is describing how one has to perform his prescribed duty, but then eventually when one is situated on the platform of bhakti, he can just serve Krishna in any capacity. That's the right understanding, right?
Yeah.
So, from what I understand, let's say a practical example. We have a very advanced devotee who comes to ISKCON New York, a Swami or a Grihastha who's a guru, whatever. So if he is situated in bhakti, means that he can jump at any time in any type of service. And that's the symptom of his advancement. That's practically what we will see. Pujari is needed, he won't be intimidated, he'll jump into it, or he'll just throw out the trash, even though he's in an exalted position and he's glorified by the others. Is it like this?
That I thought you were giving a background. What was the question?
The question is this what it means to be situated in an elevated platform to be
Well,
serving
yes.
Krishna? Because practically we don't, I don't know, at least from my faulty vision, we don't see this happening every day in ISKCON. We don't see people behave like this. Everybody's kind of has a particular inclination and he
Right,
follows that.
right.
It's not that somebody who's a scholar would jump into throwing out the trash or worshipping the deities.
Well, sometimes it can be like that. Everyone has some duty they perform in some society, you know. The devotional society is a special kind of society where the main objectives are to purify oneself and to reach out to the public to purify them. Those are the objectives of devotional society, whereas, you know, Bayer or, you know, Chrysler or some other corporation like that has a different objective in their society. So if someone is able to forego, you know, having a family, then usually they're not so pressured or so motivated then to engage in an outside occupation, which is what we call jati dharma. So even devotees who are married usually have an outside occupation. They have to support their grihastha ashram in some way or another. So they have an obligation to some kind of external social fabric. You know, in the Western world, we don't usually categorize things so much in the sense of, you know, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. But there is some external thing to do. Now, in devotee society, we find that there are some aspects of devotional service that require special skill or special abilities that not everyone has. So therefore, we have a division of labor too. But that division of labor is all within the context of outreach and personal purification, which is the main focus of the whole community, whereas people who are, you know, outside, not in devotional community there, they would be better off if they followed their, you know, dharma for whatever occupation they're in. Now, we do see that sometimes elevated devotees do perform menial tasks, maybe not so often. Oftentimes, you know, advanced devotees are also older devotees who find it physically difficult to do some things that at one point were not so difficult to do. And that's there. So in the regular varnashram system, one would not try to get a kshatriya to perform brahmana work or a brahmana to perform kshatriya work because they identify with the body and with that role. And to try to do that would feel to them like they were either beyond their capacity or degrading themselves to a lower capacity. They would have that feeling. However, in devotional service, since we're Daivi Varnashram Dharma, sometimes a person might do something that has nothing to do with their normal, you know, abilities. They may even be acting way outside of their normal abilities. That doesn't mean that they will be expert in what they're doing, but at least they'll carry it out. The example I can use is doing Sankirtan. You know, Sankirtan means that we are trying to connect with the conditioned souls and convince them at least enough to spend enough money to buy a book or two. Now, from a Varnashram perspective, that's like Vaishya work, to try to sell something or, whatever. Of course, it's not straight ahead that way. There's some Brahminical aspect to it. We're trying to explain something as well. But we might not have that kind of, ability as a salesperson. Some people do. Some people are natural salespersons. And sometimes when a person like that takes up Sankirtan, they do very well. And sometimes, even though they have a skill as a salesperson, they flop in Sankirtan because it's actually, in one sense, it's a transcendental activity. And sometimes people who have absolutely no sales ability thrive in Sankirtan. So those things sometimes make a difference, sometimes they don't make a difference. But in any case, when we are engaged in Sanatana Dharma, which is self-purification, and engaging the public in purification, then that's what we call Sanatana Dharma. It's not Jati Dharma. It may have elements, or it may parallel various things that we see in regular occupational things, like devotees taking jobs when they have a family to support, or like devotees taking very specific roles in ISKCON, like being a communications officer, or being someone who is the public relations officer in ISKCON, or something like that. Not everybody can do that kind of thing. Or someone who is involved in book publishing. Not everyone can do that kind of thing. So it has elements of a regular mundane occupation, but since the focus of it is to either purify ourselves, or actually both, to purify ourselves and purify others, then it takes on the larger aspect of Sanatana Dharma. But it still may have some aspects that only some people are able to do very well. I don't know if I answered your question, but I was trying to say some things about it.
Yeah, I'll come back to you.
Okay. Okay. Other questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Ryan.
Thank you for the class. At least the end part of the class I appreciated, especially because we understand it's one way to look at Bhakti Yoga, that the Bhakti Yoga basically means that we're trying to control the mind. You sometimes mention in your classes there are different analogies for what devotional service is, or Krishna consciousness is, and one of those is that it's a process of controlling the mind and senses, which is basically the source of all of our problems, actually, is the mind. And so in that connection, sometimes it seems like just chanting japa is the best way to control the mind, and if we're really but yet we're also encouraged to do so much preaching, and sometimes it makes more sense to spend more time chanting japa and less time preaching. But why is it not that it's kind of set up that way, that we are not function like Gaudiya Math and trying to chant?
That we do what?
That we don't function like Gaudiya Math. We don't chant like 64 rounds a day and that kind of thing. But it does seem, sometimes it seems like, well, that just probably is a better way to go.
That what?
It seems like that's a better way to go, like at least superficially. Sometimes it seems like that, And you're just wondering, why are we engaged in so many other activities that it's harder to control the mind when you're doing things, when you're doing activities.
Right.
I think just a question that's coming to my mind today. So maybe you could say something.
Well, for some people it is the right thing. Some people have the ability to chant for prolonged periods of time. Most devotees struggle with it. We see that when people perform japa, that very few people just sit down and start chanting japa, and 16 rounds later they get up and finish. Most devotees chant a few rounds and then they drift into something else, and then they chant some more rounds, and in this way it takes several sessions to get through the entire japa period. And it's not always easy, to do it that way, to chant straight through. If you place too much emphasis on just chanting, and a person doesn't have a certain sort of ability to focus, then right away they become completely mentally frustrated and they tend to just leave Krishna consciousness. So in one sense, we have to do both things. We have to perform service because by chanting, we're asking for service. So if we chant and then we don't do the service, then what's the point in the chanting? On the other side of the coin, if we perform service but we don't chant, or we don't focus on chanting, then there's a likelihood that the service will become gradually tainted by material misconceptions and material unwanted aspects. So we have to work it both ways, that we do service to the best of our ability, like the verse says today. We perform in this case, we're talking about our Sanatana Dharma service. We perform that to the best of our ability. And then we also, when we're chanting, we try to focus on the chanting process. I think in general, ISKCON has shifted a focus onto quality chanting, not necessarily, bumping up to 64 rounds or something like that. There are devotees who do 64 rounds, but most devotees would not be able to do 64 focused rounds. They might be able to somehow or another spend 3 or 4 hours or whatever it would take, 5 or 6 hours to chant that many rounds and do it in a way that was actually focused. They would just be sort of plugging in the time, So that's, all those things are there. That's also, we find that some devotees do spend more emphasis on their chanting and spend the extra time it takes to do that, and others don't. Some just focus on their service. Hopefully no one focuses on their service to the point where they're not even chanting 64 rounds. That's always a good way to wind up in a strange consciousness and lose out on devotional service. As I say, I'm never worried about the Hare Krishna movement. I'm worried about the people in the used to chant Hare Krishna movement. So that's the movement that I'm worried about. And believe me, there are a lot of people in that movement, in ISKCON. They used to chant Hare Krishna movement. So don't become one of them, But chant 16 rounds to the best of your ability. And if you focus on trying to improve that, you will eventually get the mercy of Krishna and be able to improve that. And then perform your devotional service, because that will give you the impetus to want to hear better when you chant your japa, especially if you're doing Sankirtan. You recognize that when you're in rotten consciousness, you can't do very good Sankirtan. You just get punished by the material energy in a excruciating way. So you think, well, I should have chanted better. What was it? I think Vaisheshika said something like that somehow or another the karmis know I didn't chant good rounds. and I think it is like that. Somehow they know. Okay. So we're getting over time, but thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhāgavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.